Professor, help us out here. What does this say?
The word here, Kappa Omicron Rho, it means the chief of what?
Right, the chief of what?
For centuries, historians believed every word Jesus spoke was already known. But on the northern shore of the Sea of Galilee, archaeologists have uncovered something that changes everything.
We've been uncovering amazing remains of a Byzantine church complex. The church covers an area of about 1.5 dunams.
A discovery buried for 1,500 years that reveals what Jesus secretly told Peter, words never recorded in any gospel.
In the Byzantine era, this beautiful basilica is built here and appears to be dedicated to the Apostle Peter.
Yes.
What they found was sealed beneath centuries of mud, hidden inside a forgotten church once built by the earliest followers of Christ. And the message it preserved could rewrite one of the most important moments in Christian history. The mosaic beneath the mud. On the northern shore of the Sea of Galilee, not far from where the Jordan River enters the lake, a team of archaeologists began an excavation that would soon make history. The site looked empty at first. The shore was silent, the ground heavy with layers of mud that had built up over centuries of flooding. Many earlier surveys had given up on the area, calling it unworkable. But this new team believed something was waiting below. Local fishermen had long spoken of carved stones that appeared when the water level dropped, and the archaeologists wanted to know what lay beneath them. The dig began in the heat of summer. The air smelled of wet clay and salt. Workers scraped the surface slowly, their tools clicking through dense earth. For several days, they found nothing but mud, shells, and broken pottery. Then, on the 5th morning, a trowel struck something smooth and solid. The sound was sharper than stone. They widened the trench, clearing the surface by hand. A line of small tiles began to appear beneath the silt. The colors were faint at first, then brightened as the water washed away the dirt. Over the next 2 weeks, the team worked in sections, exposing more of the structure each day. What they uncovered was astonishing. Thick walls, defined corners, and a curved chamber at the eastern end. The kind of feature found only in ancient churches. According to their field notes, the exposed area measured about 1.5 dunams, large enough to fit hundreds of people. This was no simple chapel, it was a Byzantine church. When the conservators began washing the floor, the room came alive. The mosaic beneath was nearly perfect, its patterns sharp and colorful despite the centuries that had passed. Near the center, faint Greek letters emerged. A language specialist read them slowly until the full line was clear. Peter, chief of the apostles and holder of the keys of heaven. For a long moment, no one spoke. The words were not a decoration. They were a proclamation, set into the very heart of the floor. The letters were clean, the grout untouched, the surface unusually preserved. Some of the team believed the room had been sealed to protect it. Others warned against speculation until further tests confirmed it. Still, one thing was certain. The mosaic had been placed there with purpose. As the sun set, the crew covered the floor again to keep it safe. The lake shimmered quietly in the distance. They left the site that evening knowing they had found something far greater than a ruin. According to their notes, one question remained in every mind. What story did this mosaic belong to? And what kind of town had once surrounded it? To answer that, they would have to look back in time, to a place long mentioned in Scripture, yet missing from the world's maps. The town that the Gospels lost. The team believed the mosaic's message pointed to one name that had echoed through Scripture for centuries: Bethsaida. It was the town that, according to the Gospels, had once been home to Peter, Andrew, and Philip. This was where Jesus first called his followers and performed many of his early miracles. Yet somewhere between history and time, the town disappeared. After the 1st century, its name faded from every known record. Floods reshaped the northern edge of the Sea of Galilee, and the shoreline drifted away from where it had once stood. The town that had witnessed the beginning of faith had been swallowed by earth and memory alike. Early pilgrims from the 4th century tried to find it again. They traveled the Galilean coast, guided only by stories, pointing to spots where they believed Jesus once walked. Some marked the wrong hills. Others built small shrines in hope that they had chosen correctly. But no proof ever lasted. Over the centuries, the town became less of a destination and more of a mystery, a sacred ghost hidden beneath mud and reeds. By the 19th century, scholars renewed the search with maps and spades. 2 main sites drew attention. One was at Tel, a mound almost 2 kilometers inland. The other was El Araj, a flat plain close to the water. Each site had supporters and evidence, but neither could silence the other. Et Tel had strong Bronze Age remains, but little from the time of Jesus. El Araj had Roman pottery and traces of mosaic floors, but flooding made it difficult to study. The debate continued for generations. Reports from early 20th century surveys hinted that both places held ancient remains, but the findings were scattered and incomplete. Bethsaida stayed missing, a town mentioned by every gospel reader but seen by no one. That began to change in 2016. A new international team returned to El Araj with modern tools and a clear goal: to solve the question once and for all. Using soil analysis and magnetic imaging, they detected dense shapes beneath the surface, evidence of walls, roads, and foundations. When they dug deeper, they found pottery, glass, and coins that dated back to the 1st century. Within months, structures began to appear from the mud. According to some archaeologists, the layers showed not just a small settlement, but a thriving fishing village that fit perfectly with the time of Jesus. For the first time, evidence in Scripture seemed to align. Bethsaida, the town that the Gospels had lost, was beginning to return to the world, and soon the earth would give up more than buildings. The church beneath the shoreline. The team went deeper into the soil, expecting small pieces of an old village. They thought they might find a few broken walls, some pottery, or a patch of road. Instead, the plan of a large early Christian church from the Byzantine period began to appear. Day by day, one detail led to another. A short wall became a set of rooms. Stone circles turned out to be column bases still fixed in place. By the end of the 3rd week, they uncovered a curved room at the eastern end, the area where an altar would stand in an ancient church. That was the moment they knew this was a church, and not a house or warehouse. The size surprised everyone. The floor spread wider than the small chapels known in nearby villages. The plan was neat and balanced. The building quality was high. When the conservators cleaned the floor, they found mosaics made of small red, blue, and white stones arranged in careful patterns. Sunlight made the colors stand out even more. This was not a simple village prayer room. According to some archaeologists, it looked like a place built to serve many visitors. As they cleared more earth, they reached layers that were older than the church itself. Under the foundations, they found signs of a 1st century town. There were fishing hooks, weights for nets, and simple kitchen pottery. These items match what families in a fishing town would have used. The finds suggested that a working community lived here long before the church was built. The builders of the church, it seemed, chose this ground on purpose, not by chance. Written accounts help the team understand the bigger picture. An 8th century pilgrim named Willibald wrote about a church of the apostles by the Sea of Galilee. He said it stood where the homes of Peter and Andrew had once been. For years, many scholars set that claim aside. They said it sounded like a legend. Here, though, the site at El Araj matched many parts of his description. There were guest rooms. There were parts of a bathhouse. There was a large courtyard where travelers could gather. According to reports from the field, this was the first time the written story and the ground evidence lined up this closely. By this point, the team felt they were reading a story in layers. First, there was a Roman-era fishing town. Later, a Christian community built a shrine over it. That choice made sense. Early Christians often built over places they wanted to honor. Some on the team believed this church had been raised to protect the memory of the apostles. Others said they needed more proof before making that claim. Everyone agreed the site was not random. Still, one question lingered. Why had this particular site been chosen with such precision? The answer, they soon discovered, was waiting beneath their feet. A message written in stone, buried in the very heart of the floor. The inscription that spoke through stone. The inscription sat at the center of the main hall of the church. This space is called the nave. It is the wide area where worshippers stood. A circular frame of small, bright tiles surrounded a flat panel of text. The conservators cleared it slowly with soft brushes and water. Letter by letter, the words came back to life. The team formed a half circle around the panel while the specialist in Greek read it aloud in a steady voice. The text began as a standard dedication. It credited the work to a man named Constantine. It called him a servant of Christ. This language is common in church floors from the period. Then, the line turned. It honored Peter as the chief of the apostles and as the holder of the keys. Everyone understood that much. It echoed the verse that many believers know from the Gospel of Matthew. But the final words stopped the room cold. The inscription referred to the keys of the heavenly spheres. The phrase felt out of place. According to the epigraphers on site, this wording does not appear in any known Bible manuscript. The linguists on the team said that the term sounded like a very old idea. It pointed to a view of heaven in layers or realms. Some scholars on the call later suggested that the wording might reflect an Aramaic expression that early believers used when they spoke about God's authority. They stressed that this was a proposal, not a proven fact. They said the phrase could have passed into Greek through local preaching before it was ever written down. The team looked again at the letters. The cutting was exact. The angles were clean. There were no corrections in the layout. The letter heights were uniform. This was not quick work by a village mason. It looked like text that was meant to carry weight. According to the field notes, the lines were so sharp that the floor must have been protected early in its life. That would explain why the surface shows so little wear. Others warned that only lab tests can confirm how long the floor was exposed before burial. What the words meant was the hard part. If the phrase preserved a local saying, then the mosaic might hold an echo of a teaching that never reached the written Gospels. Some on the team felt excitement, others felt worry. A few said in private that this kind of claim would draw anger from more than one side. According to reports from later briefings, the directors chose very careful language. They said the inscription expands known wording. They did not claim that it changes scripture. Even without firm conclusions, the effect was immediate. The site shifted from an interesting church to a place with the power to reshape debates about Peter's role and about how early Christians remembered Jesus' words. The letters did not feel decorative. They felt like a message placed in the floor for future eyes. To understand why anyone would hide such a statement, researchers turned to the people who built this sanctuary and to the faith that guided their hands. The faith that remembered where words fell. In the earliest centuries of Christianity, believers did not use maps or written guides to find holy places. They relied on memory. They built where stories said sacred moments had taken place. Churches were raised over caves, wells, and hills, where people believed Jesus or his followers had once stood. This was not superstition. It was a way to keep those moments alive in stone. The builders of these early sanctuaries saw themselves as guardians of memory rather than creators of something new. Across the Holy Land, that same logic shaped the geography of faith. The Church of the Nativity in Bethlehem was built above a cave said to mark Christ's birth. The Church of the Holy Sepulchre in Jerusalem stood over the hill where he was believed to have been crucified and buried. In Nazareth, the Church of the Annunciation honored the place where the angel spoke to Mary. None of these sites were chosen at random. They were selected by generations who still carried living stories passed down through families, travelers, and local communities. The church at El Araj seemed to belong to that same pattern. Its builders chose ground that older generations had already marked as sacred. They included rooms for guests, a baptistery, and a wide central space for worship. According to reports, these are features common in pilgrimage complexes that welcome travelers who came to pray or seek healing. Every element of the design pointed to remembrance. Nothing about the structure suggested invention or personal expression. The builders wanted to preserve something they already believed had happened there. Some archaeologists believe the site reflects an effort to keep a spoken memory alive. The ground beneath the basilica may have been associated with events from Jesus' ministry. For them, the design of the building itself acted like a declaration. This is where the words once fell. They were not protecting an idea, but a voice that they believed had spoken in that soil. In this view, Peter was more than a disciple remembered in stone. He was the keeper of a promise given directly by Christ. The floor mosaic that called him the chief of the apostles may not have been simple decoration. It could have been a coded reminder of a conversation that early followers never wanted to lose. Some scholars remain cautious. They say that without written proof, no one can be certain what the builders were recording. But even they agree that the combination of architecture, inscription, and location points to deliberate preservation. The people who built this church were not inventing history. They were passing something forward. And according to recent studies, what they passed on may not have been only a title or a name. It could have been the very words that Jesus once spoke to Peter. When epigraphers cleaned the final ring of the mosaic, faint letters emerged that no one had noticed before, and the meaning changed completely. The keys, the kingdom, and the hidden words. The final cleaning began with routine checks. Conservators photographed the floor under normal light. Then the technical team brought in infrared imaging to scan the surface for faint marks. According to the field log, the camera picked up a thin ring of text around the main inscription. It was badly worn, almost invisible to the eye. Under infrared, letters that looked like stains began to separate from the stone. The room went quiet. An epigrapher traced the ring on a tablet, while a second specialist read the letters aloud. The text was incomplete in places, but enough remained to build the line with confidence. After multiple passes, the team wrote the reconstruction in the notebook. It read, "He said to him, 'Guard my house, for I go to prepare the heavens.'" The words did not match any verse on record. The tone was personal. It sounded like a direct speech. Translators worked through the grammar. They noted that the rhythm did not feel like later Greek. It moved like an older speech pattern. Some scholars on the call said the line fit the shape of early Aramaic phrases. They suggested that it could be a local memory that had been translated into Greek for the mosaic. They were careful to say this was a proposal, not a proof. Others in the group urged caution and said more testing and peer review were needed. The structure of the sentence caught everyone's attention. It sounded like an extension of Matthew 16 verse 19, where Jesus gives Peter the keys of the kingdom of heaven. Here the wording continued that idea with two clear commands. "Guard my house, and I go to prepare the heavens." If the reconstruction is accurate, the first command points to Peter's duty on earth. It reads like a charge to protect the community of believers. The second clause suggests that Christ prepares the realms above while Peter keeps watch below. Some said this pairing implies a shared work that links earth and heaven. The emotional impact was immediate. A few team members felt shock. Others felt worry about how the line would be received. According to reports from the site, the directors chose to describe the find as an early local tradition that preserves an expanded form of a known promise. They did not call it a new scripture. They did not present it as a final conclusion. Even with careful language, the implications were strong. If the inscription records an early saying remembered in Galilee, then the mosaic would be the first archaeological artifact to carry a direct line spoken by Jesus to Peter. Some experts believe it reframes Peter's role. He is not only a gatekeeper who binds and looses, he becomes a steward who guards the household of faith while Christ completes the work of preparation in heaven. The team sealed the floor again for protection and sent images to outside reviewers. Within days, word began to spread beyond the site. As news spread, debates reignited across seminaries and pulpits. What did these words mean for everything Christianity had taught about Peter? The apostle who never lost his keys. For 2,000 years, the question of Peter's authority has shaped and divided the Christian world. Entire branches of faith were built around how his words and his role were understood. To some, he was the foundation of the church itself, the leader chosen to carry the mission forward. To others, he was one among equals, a symbol of faith rather than command. The argument over his keys became one of the longest-running debates in Christian history. In the centuries that followed, those differences grew wider. The Eastern and Western churches disagreed on what Christ had meant. In the West, Peter's primacy became tied to leadership, an unbroken line that led to the papacy. In the East, his role was seen as spiritual, not political, a first among equals rather than a ruler. Later, during the Reformation, Protestants read the same verse differently again. They taught that the keys were not the mark of one man's authority, but a shared symbol of faith open to every believer. Yet none of those interpretations could erase what the archaeologists found beneath the soil of Galilee. The inscription at El Araj was not written in Rome or commissioned by emperors. It was laid by local believers, carved into stone centuries before the divisions of the church even existed. And in that time, long before councils, schisms, and reformations, Peter was honored exactly as the Gospels described him: chief of the apostles, bearer of the keys, and guardian of what Christ began. According to reports from early translations, the phrasing carried a weight that felt both personal and cosmic. It did not present Peter as a ruler of men, but as a keeper of balance, the steward of faith on earth, while Christ prepared the realms above. For theologians, that idea changed the conversation. It showed that early Christians near Galilee already saw Peter's calling not as power, but as service. Even critics who doubted the hidden saying agreed that the mosaic could no longer be dismissed as mere legend. It was physical, local, and ancient, a voice from the early centuries of belief. The discovery forced a quiet reckoning. The church at El Araj had not preserved a doctrine. It had preserved a memory, and through that memory, the story of Peter had come full circle, back to the shores where it began. Today, the question is no longer only about what they found, but what it means for those who believe. Was this a message meant to reshape faith, or simply to remind us of its roots? Perhaps that is for every reader to decide. What do you think this discovery reveals about Peter's true role? Was he meant to lead or to guard? Share your thoughts below, and let the world know what you believe the keys really open.